Remember, over 80% of the injuries are under 20 miles an hour. 20 miles an hour, 80%. What does that mean? They're soft tissue injuries. In other words, I always joked, I said, you know, it's like all the attorneys want the brain dead baby case. You know what that is? The multi-million-dollar one case, you know, that he can retire on. And that's not the norm. This is the norm. It's the day-to-day soft tissue injury case. That's the norm. That's what's happening every day. And this stuff adds up, and it starts adding up real fast when you know what you're doing, and when you don't know what you're doing, it starts negatively impacting your income real fast. So out of this 80%, 87% of them are soft tissue, 32% are disc, 16% are peripheral nerve, and 10% is a concussion, and 2% is a fracture. So if I'm an attorney and I'm looking at this, I'm going, well, there's only a third chance, 1 in 3, that patient will have a disc injury. That means easily 2/3 of those cases will not have a disc injury. It gets worse with the nerve injury. There's only 16%. Now that has to be documented, and we'll go into that. That has to be documented with electrodiagnostics, and that's overwhelmingly a negative test. And I'll go into why that's overwhelmingly a negative test. So if you're an attorney, the number of cases of your potential, if this is all you know, starts to significantly diminish fast. And then you get down to 10% concussion. And most concussions, when you talk about a mild concussion, overwhelmingly don't show up in MRI and CAT scans. Not unless you're talking about the 20%, the massive injuries, the 80 miles. Remember, but that's not the routine. The mild concussion does not show up in physical findings like the CT or MRI. So that's why we have to use behavioral to find these. But that's even a small percent. And then 2% is the fracture. And here's the good and bad news about the fracture. Well, the obvious bad news, if you're an attorney, is that's a small number, 2. The good news is fractures have already been imprinted on jurors and people that it's a big thing, right? Well, we know as chiropractors that a fracture is nothing. A long bone fracture heals in 4 to 6 weeks with no complicating factors. That's not what happens with soft tissue injuries. So it's kind of weird. The soft tissue injury, people don't think much of, and that's what causes the ongoing complicating lifetime pathology factors. But the fracture, which is well known and going, oh yeah, I'm going to have a higher value case, is done 4 weeks later, as long as the fracture is not in a joint. But if it's a long bone fracture, I'm like, give me a fracture before how many chiropractors would rather have, if you only had one choice, a clean long bone fracture or a torn ligament in a joint? Which one would you want? Fracture. Every day. I'll take a fracture knowing what we know about joints and healing and pathologies and altered biomechanics. Every day I'll take that fracture because I know in 4 to 6 weeks I'm fine. I know in 4 to 6 weeks with that torn ligament, I'm going to have complicating problems on and on the rest of my life to some degree, depending on how much I stress it. There's probably people in here like that have strained their ankles playing sports or something, and now they have a weak ankle, and they turn it easy and it hurts more and things like that.